Hi, everybody. My name is Scott Morris. I'm the Director of Business Development for GTS Distribution's Gaming Division. We're here today with another one of our Retailer to Publisher webinars, and I'm very happy to introduce Chris O'Neill, the owner of Brotherwise Games. He is both a good friend and a mentor. He has awesome stuff you've probably heard of and you probably carry already because they're the makers of Boss Monster, which is my oldest son's favorite game of all time. No matter what he tells you or what anyone else says, he plays that game more than anything on the planet. It's a superbly fun card game, but they are much more than just that one hit. They have a lot of other things we're going to be talking about today. 2 new games. One of them is Night of the Ninja, which is a brand new party game. The other one is Call to Adventure Stormlight, which you may remember last time we had Chris on as a webinar. We talked a little bit about Call to Adventure as well. It's got a very unique kind of system to it, which we'll talk about. Chris has a wonderful, beautiful presentation set up and ready for us to look through and talk about. But I just want to remind everybody, as I always tell you, everything is on the table. You can ask any kind of questions you like. If you would like to ask a question, you can hover over your video window, and at the bottom there's a little chat bubble that'll open up a chat window, and then you can either send a message to all panelists, which are myself and Chris, or you can send a message to all panelists and attendees so that everyone can see it. Both of these games, just so you know, are available for pre-order right now. They're not released yet, so they are something that you would pre-order. So if you're looking in the warehouse stock right now and you're like, why is it 0? What's going on? Like that's what's happening. It's all pre-orders. They're not released yet. But other than that, I'm going to let my face that was made for radio, I'm going to let it be quiet. And Chris, I'm going to give you the floor and let you start talking about stuff. And as questions pop up, I'll just kind of work them into the conversation, okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's all you, my friend.
All right. Hi, everybody. And thank you for coming today. And first off, thanks to Scott and GTS for hosting these. We really love being able to talk to retailers. You guys are obviously on the front lines. Right now, we are really sympathetic to the challenges everyone's going through. We've been talking with GTS and other distributors about how we can help out with that. And I think as we get closer to the reopening and fall season, hopefully Brotherwise will be able to contribute to getting your store back and normal if it's not already. And I hope everybody's staying safe. So I'm gonna share my screen here, and forgive me if I screw this up. And Scott is going to call out any questions that you send to me because I'm not great at that, but feel free to interrupt at any time. We'll keep this fairly casual. I don't think this is gonna be super long, but I'm gonna try to leave some time for Q&A or commentary. So if you have advice for us on how we can help you sell our games, particularly in this environment, feel free to reach out and let us know. And I presume, Scott, we have some way to send folks this presentation and to remind them of these sell sheets later on.
Yes. Easiest thing you can do is when we're done with this, you can just email me the presentation and then we can put it on Dropbox and make it both pushed out to everyone who is an attendee and then also make sure it's on the video when we put it on YouTube.
Fantastic. Okay, so here we go. Let's see if we can do this. And oh, it looks like I can just share my presentation and see myself. Is that working?
That is correct. Yep. I see the beautiful presentation and your tiny little face.
Lovely. So we are Brotherwise, obviously. You will know us best from Boss Monster. That came out way back in 2013 after a successful Kickstarter that allowed us to get into the gaming biz. We focused on a sort of low quantity, high quality production cycle. We consider ourselves a boutique. We're not trying to become, the next Asmodee. We're really trying to focus on putting out the best games we can and the ones we really believe in. So since that initial Boss Monster launch, obviously the Boss Monster line has grown a fair bit, but we've also come out with Call to Adventure, which is a hero crafting / storytelling game, and Unearth, which is a dice chucker sort of set collection game. All of these have done very well. All have been reprinted multiple times. We hope you're selling all of these. If you're not, you should talk to us about how we can maybe help you get started selling these. I'm gonna, oh gosh, I don't know how do I get, oh, there we go. I just click on it. As Scott said, today we're going to talk about the Stormlight Archive, which is a new Call to Adventure standalone expansion. We're also going to talk about Night of the Ninja, which is a social deduction game by probably our favorite game designer, Justin Gary, who did Ascension, Shards of Infinity, a couple other games we're really fond of. And I'm really just teasing this so that you guys know that you've got some old standbys coming. We've got a new mini expansion for Boss Monster coming out later in the fall in time for the holiday season. And I'm going to tease a new Boss Monster spinoff called Overlord, which if any of you were at Gamma, you would have seen both of these teased, but we have just a tiny bit more to show you today. And we're not quite ready to talk about these fully, but we will be soon. And I guarantee Scott will be one of the first people to hear about this, so you can always check in with him later. So let's talk about what's coming up. This is the Stormlight Archive. And some of you who followed the Call to Adventure series may have heard that one of the reasons we really sort of took a deep dive into this series or into this game is we had a couple of our favorite fantasy authors, Patrick Rothfuss and Brandon Sanderson, and we wanted to find ways to gamify their fiction. And so the original Call to Adventure was actually born out of this thought of like, how do you take character-driven fantasy fiction and gamify it? And so in Call to Adventure, you are building a hero. You start with an origin, a motivation, and a destiny. And over the course of the game, you acquire traits and face challenges to become the hero with the greatest destiny. They're both competitive and cooperative modes. And that game, the base game of Call to Adventure, has done really well for us. It's, I think, onto its third reprinting now, and has just been, it's just a lot of fun. It's one of those things we hear from folks who like storytelling games, but also would like some meat behind them. It's a storytelling game with a lot of mechanics behind it. And if you haven't played this yet, I encourage you to, particularly if you're a fantasy literature fan. You will enjoy it. So the Stormlight Archive captures Brandon Sanderson's series of the same name. Brandon Sanderson is probably, if you don't know fantasy fiction, probably the top-selling fantasy author right now in the various big three out there of Rothfuss and George R.R. Martin and Brandon Sanderson. Martin's probably a little bit more well-known to the non-fantasy reader due to Game of Thrones on HBO. But Sanderson's books sell incredibly well, and his fan base is incredibly large. I think the Reddit group was, like 900,000 people or some insane number. I can't remember what it was, of just huge, maybe 90,000, huge numbers of people who follow this author and who we were looking to capture as potential gamers as well. So this is a standalone expansion. If you've seen The Name of the Wind, based on Patrick Rothfuss's books, that one was a shuffle-in expansion. But Sanderson's already put out 3 of these books, and there was so much material to pull from that we went there. So as I said before, you start with an origin, a motivation, and a destiny in this game. All of those are shown here. In Call to Adventure, your origin gives you some starting stats, which are, we've got that wisdom rune there and that purple charisma rune on the aristocrat. Your motivation gives you some powers that you can use during the game. And your destiny is what you're trying to achieve. So you're trying to, your points for whether you win or not are sort of connected to your destiny. And in the Stormlight Archive series, the heroes of the books are what are called Knights Radiant. And the Knights Radiant have these almost sort of demigod-like powers that are connected to sort of various spirits. And most of the destinies in this game are connected to the Knights Radiant from the books. And so we have a new mechanic for the Stormlight, which is this new icon. You can see that sort of swords within a circle up there on the Lightweaver card. That is the Radiant icon. And if you're able to achieve a certain number of those over the course of the game, you become a Knight Radiant and gain really powerful abilities that'll help your end game in various ways. The really cool thing about this is that we were able to work hand in hand with Sanderson's team, and particularly his art director there. So all of the art in this game has been approved by Brandon Sanderson's team and has, I think, really brought the books to life. If any of you follow us on Facebook, you've seen these cards teased. And what we're hearing from fans is just this excitement, not just about the game, but about seeing these characters brought to life.
Yeah, that artwork is absolutely gorgeous. And having been someone who has read some of the Brandon Sanderson novels, that it fits very, very well. So that's really cool to see.
Yeah, so we've generally with Call to Adventure, we try to stay with a more concept arty look. We don't go for sort of full magic card fleshed out art. The idea is to keep the art relatively open to interpretation. With this series, because the characters are so strongly described in his books, we did end up going into sort of more detail and a little bit trying to get closer to canon on these. So anyway, really gorgeous. The other neat thing about this game, which is fun, is that we took it as an opportunity to expand on the base game and improve some aspects of the base game, particularly cooperative play. So now there's one adversary in the Stormlight archives. That's Odium, who is kind of best seen as sort of an avatar of rage and wrath and anger. And the heroes can unite to fight Odium using these different cooperative quests. So here's one called Honor is Dead. This is an adversary quest. It's got a certain set of rules that follow it, a certain set of challenges. And as the players get more experience with this set, there's tougher and tougher challenges that they can face when going against Odium. So it's a lot of fun. It's a really neat series. We're really excited for this. The launch date is currently end of June, and while we're tracking for that, I will say here that there is every possibility that might be pushed depending on what we're seeing happening nationwide in terms of shutdowns and whether that's the best time to launch it.
What are you talking about? Nothing's getting delayed right now, right? Everything's on time.
Hey, if we can get it out end of June and have it be great, we'll be happy. But we want to position you guys to be able to sell this best, and so we'll keep you posted on what might happen with that date.
I got a question for you, Chris, because I'm obviously very familiar with Call to Adventure. You kind of sneak previewed it to me back at Origins a couple of years ago before it was even like public or anything like that. And I remember the very first thing that kind of struck me was I felt like it was a dice chucker. But then I realized really quickly in like 2 minutes of playing it that the rune system, even though it's just a simple one side or the other side, is extremely challenging and extremely complex, not in a tough way, but in an exciting way. There may be some retailers on here who are not familiar with Call to Adventure. Can you just kind of maybe back up one slide and explain a little bit about the runes and kind of how that piece, melds itself into the gameplay?
Let me go to...
Oh, he walked out. See, that's it. That's the end of the webinar, folks. No. I'm presuming he's going to get some of the runes right now, which are really, really cool.
So how do I go to camera here in a way that is...
easiest way to do it, just stop sharing your screen. Yep, there you go. And you're
okay, so in Call to Adventure, instead of using dice, you use these cool runes. And they're two-sided. There's only two results. One side is a single success. The other side is double successes. Whoops. Fumble fingers, double successes. And so while you always have a certain number of runes to chuck, you always have this basic rune, which has a success on one side, and there's another basic rune there, and you get a number of those. As you gain abilities, you get better and better at certain tasks. So we really like this idea of casting runes because it's sort of a storytelling, what's my fate type of game. But the fact that you're using a binary sort of randomizer instead of a traditional multi-sided die, it does lead to sort of some interesting math behind what happens with the various successes. Sometimes it makes it a little easier to predict what's going to happen, and other times your variance is a little bit higher. So what we really wanted to do there was sort of maximize players' control over any random situation, but also recognize that occasionally fate is going to take charge. So depending on how many runes you're casting, your variance changes a fair bit. It's a really fun system, and there's just, I don't know if you guys can hear it on here, but the satisfaction of being able to cast the runes and have them scatter across the table and then read the runes like a seer or a fortune teller, that's really fun. So
It's a super unique mechanic, and it's something that, when I first looked at it, I was like, well, it's just an A or a B, right? And then as you start to realize, as you're adding more cards and you're getting access to more runes, what really struck me was that it not only offers you like tremendous options and tremendous decisions to make in the game, but it also adds an element of role playing to it. Like, I remember the very first game we played, I started to realize that I was going after one or two types of runes, and my character was really kind of becoming this specific archetype that I knew, right? And
yeah,
just, you naturally, if you're familiar with even the basics of role playing, you just naturally start to kind of slide into a role-playing experience with the game, where you get talking about your character and you get talking about what they're doing and the adventures they're going on and everything. And it's a very, very engaging system.
yeah, it's we're really happy with it. Here's the basic setup in a typical call to adventure game. And so that Scott is describing this for me, but I'll put this out because I think it's a little bit helpful here. For those of you that haven't seen it, you sort of start with your origin and motivation, which, this is a student who is motivated to become the sworn protector. Their destiny over there is hidden. But they are, over the course of the game, acquiring those other cards, like they're brave, they're studious, they've survived the flames from some sort of challenge. And as they do that, they're building up those abilities there. So in that sense, it's an engine builder. You get more and more of those abilities, which correspond to the runes you can cast. So this person has a point of constitution up there from Survive the Flames, a point of intelligence from Studious. And as they go through the game, their story gets more and more built out, and they become more and more capable and powerful. So the exact same thing happens in the Stormlight Archives version, but the cards that you're acquiring are situated fully within the Stormlight Archives.
Yeah, Julio just made a comment and he said, I've played the game and had a lot of fun. The runes and unique paths are awesome. Yeah, it gives you a lot of freedom. I remember the first time I played solo, I went through and I had a wonderful time, and I was like, man, this is my character and this is what happened. He didn't win, so he kind of had a little bit of a struggle. And then immediately I was like, all right, I'm going to play again. And I started over with the exact same setup and the exact same cards, and it was a completely different experience, like
Yeah.
completely different experience, which that's very hard to consistently come back to, right? When in gaming, it's like sometimes you can get a little bit of repetitive on things, but this is so many options, so many decisions, but never so many that you can't make the decision that you need to make, right? Like, there's no AP in this game at all.
No, there's not. And I will say the game can be quite casual. I mean, you can min-max the hell out of this and get pretty aggressive, but it's really meant to bring in, gamers who wouldn't necessarily be normally brought to the table. So, that's what we're always trying to do, is think about what kind of games will bring non-gamers to the table. This one is really meant to capture those folks who are just fans of that fantastic storytelling idea.
Yeah, if you're a store that has success with comic books or just books, I know there's a lot of stores that'll bring in like paperback books, or role-playing games. This is something that kind of blends into that crowd, right? And kind of mixes over between those and the board gaming community as well. And you're spot on. The simplicity of the game in terms of the rules and how to play make it very inviting for everybody. I've actually played with non-gamers, people that I wouldn't really normally consider to play anything other than maybe like Scrabble or Boggle with, and they loved it. They were like, yeah, this is really cool. So
Yeah, we're really, really happy with it. And we do expect the response to this one to be pretty big. Again, Sanderson fans are just rabid. And one of the things that we're going to be doing is he's actually going to be pushing this game to his fans on his website through his social media networks. And so we're hoping to get a big pull from there.
yeah, just to give everybody a little bit of insight, I obviously can't share the exact numbers on everything, but normally in the distribution side of the business, we see a spike in pre-orders towards the actual release date. As something gets closer and closer to that time frame, within about maybe 1 to 3 weeks from the release date, we'll see spikes. And with this one, we saw an immediate spike, which was pretty amazingly cool to see that, not only good game and good company, but obviously good IP and good name with Brandon Sanderson there. It really resonated with everyone the minute we set it up. So our numbers look very, very strong on this.
Yeah, this one just baked in fan base, as they say. So, some selling points there. If you have comments or thoughts on how we can help you promote this game or move it in your store, one of the things I'll say is we're big fans of demo copies. Scott and I have talked about this a lot. I don't know to what degree we were fully enrolled in GTS's demo program, Scott, but we should be.
Yes, you guys are part of the base program right now,
Yep.
Which is the essentially retailers who are brick and mortar retailers can get a copy of a base game, not an expansion. So in terms of Call to Adventure, you could get the base game of Call to Adventure, or you could get the Stormlight archive as demo copies. The other one that was a shuffle-in expansion and not a standalone expansion, you wouldn't actually be able to add that in. Yeah, Norman just said, literally like a second before you started talking about demo copies, Norman said, "Are there demo copies available, or will they be available?" And he goes, "I'm a telepath." That's awesome. You can contact us. We'll be happy to get stuff to you guys. And then, of course, if for any reason, if you can't, for some reason get a hold of your GTS salesperson and you're like in an absolute rush, Chris can always help you as well. But you are part of the main demo program, and we can get that boss monster stuff. We can get the Stormlight stuff. We can get the base game for Unearth, things like that. So.
Yeah, and I will include our email in the presentation that Scott sends out.
Yep. Somebody else just made a comment, said Call to Adventure tends to do really well with the D&D fans, like we talked about. They latch onto that idea of building their character and telling their story. That's actually a funny and interesting point, because I played this game, the base game, once with a very, very heavy RPG person, and he was so focused on this is the way I want my guy to be built out, that he was skipping over opportunities to take cards that he probably could have gotten really easily and made himself stronger just for the sake of, no, this is the way that Balthazar is going to come out, right? So it was pretty cool.
We see that all the time when we're demoing the game. We'll be like, you sure you don't want this really powerful card? Like, no, my dude's a thief. So
that's funny.
Yeah, and that is interesting. We really did market this pretty heavily to the RPGers as a campaign in an hour, so that if you don't have time to put together your whole, D&D session, you can, you can just sort of tell that character's story over the course of this 30 to 60-minute game. And people really latched onto that. There's also this surprisingly huge contingent of fan fiction online based on characters that were created here. So there's a Board Game Geek thread with a bunch of fan fiction. There's a Reddit thread with a bunch of fan fiction. So people sort of tell their story, and then they use that as a writing prompt to do their fantasy writing. It was fun. Very cool stuff. Okay, so any questions for that, you can keep sending those to Scott, and he'll throw those through to me. But I'm going to move on to Night of the Ninja. Night of the Ninja is $24.95 MSRP. This is a social deduction game that plays up to 11 players. There is a 2-player variant baked into the game, but it really starts at 4 players. And this one was actually slated for a summer release as well. And for obvious reasons, we pushed it to September. But we're really excited about it. It was, if any of you are at Gamma, you can see us playing this at the sessions at night with lots of people gathered around. You'll see the card art in a second. The card art really brings people in. But the really neat thing about this game is all the card art is paper cut art. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. But all of this is paper cut that is done either as shadow boxes or layered paper cut art and then photographed. And so we think it's gorgeous, and I'm betting you'll agree when you see these cards. So anyway, this is going to be a late September release now, and Scott and I were talking about finding ways to get all of you in this session an early copy. Hopefully we'll be able to do that. He and I will keep talking more about that. So this is Night of the Ninja. We're pitching this as the next coup or One Night Ultimate Werewolf. It's a social deduction game, but there's a couple mechanics in it that make it faster paced than Werewolf and Coup, and a little bit more structured than Werewolf. So it is easy to learn. You can learn it in 5 minutes. A whole game of a few players can be played in 15 minutes. Because you're playing in 2 teams against each other, it actually doesn't really matter how many players there are. The game is still very fast and can take generally around 15 to 20 minutes regardless of your player count. As I mentioned earlier, this is created by Justin Gary, who Shards of Infinity I think is probably one of the best deck builders made out there in terms of ease of play, balance, and excitement. I've got the app version, and I bet I play it 6 or 7 times a day, just whenever I'm sitting around. I just love that game. So we love Justin. We love what he's done with this. But essentially, you are in a house of ninjas. It's the Lotus clan versus the Crane clan. And each of you know who your clan is, but you don't know who anyone else's is. So I'm Lotus, but I don't know who else is Lotus or Crane. And it's my job to figure out who's in the opposing house and to kill them before they can kill us. The house cards are all ranked. So there's a number 1 Lotus, a number 2, and the highest surviving member of that house at the end of the round, that whole clan wins and gets points. Now, the neat thing about this is you're fighting for your house, so you know who you are. But there is a draft. So each person draws 3 ninja cards. Some of the ninja cards are cards that give you information. You can look and see who belongs to which house. Some of the cards allow you to kill other players, and some of them are trickster cards, which do all kinds of other stuff. So during the draft phase, you're able to decide on your role. It's always a very quick draft. You're only having to make 2 decisions because you're taking 2 cards for each round. And then each of the cards is played in phases. So the information gathering cards are played earlier. The killer cards are played later. In between are the trickster cards, which switch up the game. And the really cool thing is if you play as a team, I'm sort of able to get information, which I pass to Scott. He uses that information to slay an opponent or to mess up their plans. Really, really fun. There's lots of lying. There's lots of cajoling. There's lots of, fun threatening, not the bad threatening kind. And at the end of that, I get an honor token if my clan has prevailed, but only 1 individual wins. So the first ninja to 10 points of shurikens there wins the game. And so at some point, houses will turn against each other. And you'll have this situation where if I know that Scott is about to win, even though he's on my house, I'll try to sell him out to the other team. Or I'll try to throw the
evil betrayal.
Evil but inevitable betrayal. So it is really fun. This is, one of the issues I have with social deduction is that they can tend to drag on, that there tends to be a bit more drama in it sometimes than payoff. Coup obviously is really cool. And, Coup is a really wonderful execution of social deduction. This is a little bit simpler in some ways and a little bit more accessible to new players. So if you've got people and you're trying to say, hey, check out this really cool game called Coup, and then you're sitting down and realize, and they're sort of like, which role am I right now and what do I do? With Ninja, it's really simple. You get very simple actions you can do each turn. But the way that they interact with each other during a multiplayer session is really fun. So this is, we're really hoping that this will shake up the social deduction space a little bit. One of the things that we think it really has going for it, obviously, is the art and the way that, I can't tell you the number of people who at the various demos would sort of just stop and say, whoa, what's happening with that art there? This is actually one of the shadow boxes being constructed. So you can see there, that's the thief card, which is a trickster. And that's about 10 or 12 different layers in that card there that are putting that together. So this one, I think one of the things we'll see happening with this is probably a little bit of a slow start because social deduction during the pandemic may be a little bit challenging, but we're really hoping that this takes off as people are able to get back together later in the fall, is our hope. Thus the push. And I think that's most of what I have to say about that. Any questions on Night of the Ninja?
Julio asked, is it kind of like Bang? My response to that was, in a way, but it's a very different experience, obviously, right? The option of sitting across the table and looking at someone going, should I kill you? Should I not kill you? What should I do?
There's a little bit more, because of the team versus individual payoff in this one. There's a little, the game has a slightly different dynamic over the course of the game. Bang, also another great game like this, and it does have some things in common, but again, I think that the overall dynamic, because of the team versus individual reward system, sets it apart a little bit.
And Justin and I go way back. Justin is one of the first people I ever met in the industry, actually. He is possibly the nicest person in the industry. The guy is always smiling. He's always high energy. He's just very excited. He loves what he does. And it's funny because, as you mentioned earlier, a lot of people do know him from Ascension and Shards of Affinity and things like that. He's made a lot of party games that have always kind of flown under the radar. And I've always thought that it was maybe because the artwork just didn't pop and didn't catch people. When you're buying a game that's, anywhere between 15 and 30, you want it to be something inspiring. And this is beautiful. I mean, this is just like, I look at these, the art, it looks like candy. Like, it looks like, I want to hold these. I want to play with these cards. Just really, really very stylish from the pattern perspective, I guess, the paperwork perspective of it. But it's also the coloring of it is extremely, extremely awesome.
It is. It's super satisfying. The kind of the neat thing is as you go from the various phases of the information gathering to the killing, it's going over the course of the night. So you start at dusk with that yellow card there in the middle and sort of progress to the ninja cards, which are dark blue. It's visually super satisfying, and you guys will really be pleased with the way this looks. Justin came to us with this and he said, I've got this great game, but I think, Brotherwise is kind of known for putting together games that have a certain look and a certain feel. And he thought that we could really take advantage of that. And I think we delivered for him. I really feel good about this one.
There's a great question from Jasper. He said, do you have a press page with art and logos for retailers to use? I know one of the presenters just put in a link to the actual Night of the Ninja webpage that's on Brotherwise's page, but I think, and I don't want to overstep myself, I think you do have a retailer resource page, if I remember right?
No, I mean, we have a sell sheet for this, but in terms of other assets, that's certainly something we could provide. Okay. Scott, let's you and I talk after this in terms of what would be most helpful for folks.
Easily done. And I put the link in there for all the panelists and attendees to see. It's brotherwisegames.com/Night of the Ninja with just hyphens in between each.
Yeah. Okay, so any other questions on Ninja, feel free to shoot them through. And I'm just going to close out the presentation section here with a couple teasers. So one is we've got Vault of Villains coming later in the fall. This is one of the mini expansions for Boss Monster. The mini expansions require one of the base games to play. Vault of Villains is a mini boss expansion. So if any of you have played or moved Boss Monster 3, Rise of the Mini Bosses, you know that game introduced coins and mini bosses. And they were super cool. They were a great mechanic. Players loved them. They loved having these mini bosses that they would throw onto the rooms. They're kind of like room enchantments. But one of the things we heard was that that mechanic was diluted when people tried to shuffle together Boss Monster 3 with Boss Monster 1. And that's the story of expansions, right? As you add in new mechanics, they're great, they're cool, they revitalize the player base. But when players try to combine things, they run into mechanic dilution, and that gets frustrating. So Vault of Villains is meant to tackle that. It adds in enough mini bosses and enough coin rooms so that you can play Boss Monster with Vault of Villains and Rise of the Mini Bosses. Everything will shuffle together well in that combo. There's even cards that are meant to address the 5 to 6 player expansion, Crash Landing. so you can play with more players now. So we call out this the one expansion to unite them all. It sort of brings all those expansions together, and we hope sort of revitalizes the Boss Monster base. Last year, we actually rested that brand because we felt like we were bringing out games too quickly, and they weren't staying on shelves long enough. So, we wanted to give that brand a break, and now we're back.
I like how one of the bosses is odious. It's
yeah,
a nice tie-in there. That's pretty sharp.
Tie-in, absolutely. We're the Boss Monster games are filled with Easter eggs and references. Sometimes they're a little bit on the nose, like Morose, the Sad Titan, and sometimes they're a little bit tougher to get, like the Corrigan. Depending on your musical taste, you may or may not get that.
Yep, Billy's a good guy.
Yeah. So this is actually being released contemporaneously with Overlord. So Overlord is a very different sort of game. We're calling it a Boss Monster adventure because it's the same IP. We're really not ready to say a ton about this just yet, but I did want to tease it because it is coming together, and I'm just so delighted with it. This was a game brought to us by some outside designers. The original theme was a plant theme, but at the moment, there were a number of plant games being released, and we thought that was going to be a bit tougher play space to market in. So we decided it was the perfect way to take Boss Monster from the dungeon into the overworld. So here you are a Boss Monster attempting to become the overlord of the world of Arcadia above the dungeons, and you're doing that in a way that is sort of best described as King Domino meets Sushi Go. So each of these tiles is scored in a different way. Some of them, like the green tiles, are scored based on the more that you have. Some of them, like those graveyards, those purple graveyards, are scored based on who has the most of them. It's all very simple. There's multiple paths to victory. It's meant to be fully playable by families, accessible 8 and above. There's just a lot you can do. So you've got this tile placement. You've got these little monster tokens that you can put on top of the tiles. Those are scored spatially. So if you're able to get those tokens in a row, that works out there. At the end of the game, you've sort of got these various points that you can add up to victory based on how you did on the tiles. It's set within the Boss Monster IP. We've sort of taken the Boss Monster sprites up to 124. We're past the 16-bit or 32-bit stage here. It is a drafting game, so you're drafting these tiles from a central market, but it's a very simple draft. We really think this has the potential to do a lot to bring other gamers into the Boss Monster world as well. So when both of these release in the fall, we're hoping you'll be able to take both Vault of Villains and Overlord and really pump up your Boss Monster sales again in your that whole line.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea whenever you have a game that's as successful as Boss Monster has been for as long as it's been, to be able to find new ways to break down the barriers of entry, right? Get people involved in the games more, find out other ways to explore the game if they already love it, or just get new people into it. So I think that is all exciting and good stuff. Julio said, it reminds me a bit of Between Two Cities. It does kind of look like that in terms of like the grid-like fashion.
Yeah.
But I think from what at least Chris has shared with me, it's definitely much different in terms of scoring and opportunities to play and stuff like that.
It is, and maybe even a little simpler.
Yeah, because you're only worried about your own kind of area.
Right. You're not playing your opponent's tiles or anything like that.
Yep. And just so everyone knows, Vault and Overlord Boss Monster Adventure, those are not solicited yet. They're going to be released later. You guys are literally the first people seeing this. So Chris even surprised me with it. I didn't know it was going to be here.
We haven't even sent out the solicits for this yet. This is literally teaser time. So you'll learn a lot more about this in the coming months.
That's exciting. And I would imagine, anyone who's obviously done very well with Boss Monster will more than likely do well with the expansion, of course. And the Overlord being a new adventure sounds like a great game for people to look into from the demo perspective, to be able to have in the stores as well.
Yep. Again, another one, we'll be happy to get you guys demo copies.
Yep. That's awesome. That's awesome. Cool. So that are really all the questions that have come in right now. We've had a lot of good interaction, so I really do appreciate it. Chris, what is the best way for retailers to get a hold of you if they want to ask you any kind of follow-up questions or anything like that?
We'll send that out with a presentation, but my email is bwisegames@gmail.com. That's BWISEGAMES@gmail.com. And there it is. Scott did it. And one of the things I'll say here is we love having retailers reach out to us. You guys know best how to move these games. And if you reach out to us and say, hey, man, it would really help me move Boss Monster if you sent me a box of prizing so I can do a Boss Monster tournament or some game night kits, we never say no to that. We're always happy to send you stuff. We really believe that game stores are the best place for these games to be seen and experienced, and we want to support you in that. We also consider our partners like GTS to be critical to that. So we will be part of GTS's demo program and continue to do that. But there's no reason you can't reach out to me directly if you have a question that you want to ask me directly.
For sure. That's awesome to hear. There was someone that just made a comment that I thought was really good to share. It says, we brought a lot of new gamers into the hobby with Boss Monster, and Overlord sounds like an even better gateway game for them to bring more fans in. So that's really cool.
Yeah, Boss Monster, as simple as we as gamers might see it, there's a fair bit of complexity there when you actually break it down. And we have been hunting for a game that we thought would just be absolutely accessible. And we found this one, and we're really happy with it. So yeah, we expect you to be able to pull this out at your Pokemon tournaments as easily as you would pull it out at your Magic tournaments. It's a great appetizer game, a great in-betweener, and it should be an easy sell for you. The cover, which we will be able to share soon, is done by one of our favorite artists, Darren Calvert, who's a sort of a cartoony style concept artist who we've worked with a little bit on Boss Monster in the past, and we're just so excited about it. It's going to look so pretty.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining, man. Really do appreciate it. Know it was bright and early for you on pandemic time out there. All the retailers who joined, thank you very much. Really do appreciate it. I know it's kind of crazy right now. Some of you are in your stores, some of you are not in your stores, and it's a little bit all over the place, but I appreciate everyone taking the time. Until we see you next time, though, thanks so much for watching, and have a great week in your stores.